The Cosmospheres, an operating system similar to science fiction Star Wars type of craft. I have to admit, I never even knew this existed until today. And this is what they looked like in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And what are they? In February 1992, Russian President Boris Yeltsin, that was right after the fall of the Soviet Union, proposed to the United States and the United Nations a global defense shield with Star Wars base technology on Russian space technology. Many will wonder what these backward Russians might have that are valuable to the Strategic Defense Initiative SDI research. The little known truth is that they began developing an operating Star Wars type defense system September of 1977 and have since greatly improved it. Let's see what went on there. And I'll leave another link for you. Vans, Air Force, Astronauts and Wheat Fields by Doug Reeves, and you can see various images that they have here. Some of them are, of course, of these Cosmospheres. It says, bet you didn't know that the first Russian in space had to, upon re-entry, eject at 22,000 feet. And here's an actual Soviet space test article. Anyway, various images from these things, but let's see what happens here. The Cosmospheres of Russia. And it is a space trinity system. It was built around weapons, radiated particles, and neutrons. And the article described here how the system evolved between 1977 and 1983. And it gives examples of how it was used in the period. And the writer says here, first I'll try to convince you of the value of my information. This is by Robert E. McIlwain, B.S. Physics and Astronomy, UWEC. The main source of the article is published in a weekly newspaper, Wisconsin Report, WR, of Brookfield, Wisconsin, written by Dr. Peter David Better, a respectable lawyer in Washington, D.C., holds a doctorate in jurisprudence and is an expert in international jurisprudence, economics, and information. He got a lot of this information from his CIA associates and other intelligence services in other countries from people who did not approve of much of what was going on or planned behind our backs. So this is CIA associates information. Now, they believed that at least a limited public display might delay or eventually stop the worst from happening, such as a nuclear war or a national dictatorship. Dr. Better began appearing on local radio and in discussion with TV producers, but soon discovered that he had been denied access to the stations by the government's threats that their licenses would be revoked. They didn't want him to speak about this. So he started producing 1-hour monthly cassettes and sending them over to an ever-increasing number of subscribers. And from June 21st, 1975 to November 3rd, 1982, he wrote 80 cassettes. The audiobook is called Dr. Better Audio Letters Plus 8, and 3 special cassettes. On September 1st, 1977, the Wisconsin Reporter began publishing recordings of those tapes. And based on the information from his sources, Dr. Better predicted what the Marines on the Beer for a complete time before it happened, warning American Pentagon and Mossad were conspiring to do so to anger Americans against others. He mentioned the impending coup in Egypt. Dr. Better predicted that he called Leonid Brezhnev's withdrawal a week before Brezhnev officially died. And his rapid replacement by Andropov, which occurred just 3 days after Brezhnev's death, to the astonishment of the entire government and media analysts. Now, what about these Star Wars space arms trades? In September 77, Russians began launching manufactured satellites, Cosmo interceptors are called, equipped with radiously charged items into Earth's orbit. And in April 1978, there were 36 of them, and they had finished the destruction of all U.S. spy satellites and the early warning. On September 27, 1977, Dr. Better called the Moon Battle, a Cosmos Interceptor series in orbit used a neutron particle radius, and the Russians then rapidly deployed their own military bases on the moon. So he's claiming that there are bases on the moon. A second part of their space trinity, beginning October 4th, 1977, with 7 extremely strong bases on the side of the moon facing Earth and also on the far side of the moon. And that's the first time I'm hearing about this. The first test of the moon base took place November 19, 1977, ironically about the same day as the premiere of the first Star Wars movie with the Death Star things. Now, they were aiming for the cyclone near India, but they miscalculated the ray's deviation from the Earth's magnetic field, and the ray hit the ocean too close to shore, creating a tsunami. And if 2 more rays of charged particles had struck from the lunar bases in quick succession, they have created the effect of hydrogen bomb on their target. And the third leg in the Russian space trinity is the space itself. The first generation of Cosmospheres were electrogravity weapon platforms with individual reactors, mounted rockets, launchers, somehow invisible to radar, over 40 miles, perhaps with coating, equipped with radiously charged particles. And there are references to quantum potentials, reverse time, electromagnetic wave weapons, and Putin's new game, the zombie psychotronic weapons. I mean, I've never heard of this before. In late 1977, early 1978, there was a strange series of giant explosions in the air along the east coast of the United States and elsewhere, and these explosions have never been satisfactorily explained, either by the government or by scientists or the media, and they could not be explained by any ultrasonic flight and were much larger than the breaking of sound. The giant explosions were actually caused by the Russian Cosmos, which put charged particles in the atmosphere in a loss function to announce their presence. And the main purpose of this system was to protect a country from attack. And during the weekend, January 20th, 1980, they carried out such a mission. They prevented the first strike against Russia. An operation began with a fleet of 82 special reconnaissance aircraft that could reach the shores of a country below the surface of the water. So Dr. Better described part of the action in audio letter number 53, recorded January 21st, 1980, and he said, "This is where the real action began, in the Caspian Sea and in northern Norway. Subcraft with pilots were on their way. They traveled underwater in the first phase of their mission. And late Saturday afternoon in Washington time, a coded signal was sent to subcraft to continue as planned. At the time, the northern subcraft team was in the White Sea. The southern group had reached the northern tip of the Caspian Sea. It was already dawn. It was Sunday morning, the 20th of the month of the subcraft teams. Their orders were to wait all day underwater, invisible. And then after sunset, they were to continue their steady approach to their goals. Subcraft kept a strict audio silence. They were in the water so that they were invisible to the eye on the radar. At the same time, they were shallow enough not to be detected by sonar. Also, their infrared signatures were negligible as a result of extensive development. In a nutshell, by Western technology standards, they were undetectable. But in audio letter number 41, I revealed that Russia owned a supership. It's called Psychoactive Distance Meter, PRF. It does not look like sonar and similar techniques. PRF focuses on the actual individual signature of the target, and there's no known method to block that. And expanding their fleet in the Arabian Sea, the Russians pretended to have been deceived by the Bolshevik distraction with aircraft carriers. In this way, they were encouraged to launch subcraft into their targets, and they waited until the subcraft were away from their bases and the eyes of the Bolsheviks directed operating from the first blow. But all the time, they were constantly monitored by the Cosmospheres Cosmospheres that used the PRF, and shortly after midnight, the Cosmospheres started firing with their weapons of radial charged particles, whatever those particles are. There were 10 subcraft in the White Sea. They each disappeared in a dazzling blue-white jet of steam, smoke and fire, and at the northern tip of the Caspian Sea there were 19 subcraft. They all had the same fate. And the third generation of jumbo Cosmospheres first developed April 1981 in parallel with the first of the U.S. space shuttle, and they interfered in the missions. Of course, NASA successfully covered them with techniques similar to the one in the movie Capricorn 1. Jumbo Cosmospheres are much larger than first generation models and use electromagnetic propulsion instead of rockets to move. So they use electromagnetism to move and not rocket fuels and things. For about 2 years after Dr. Better stopped subscribing to audio letters in November 1982 due to heart problems, and his distributor Audiobooks Inc. Better, which he had received from his sources. The special supplementary issue dated March 26, 1984 describes how the Cosmospheres captured 2 telecommunications satellites shortly after launching from U.S. Space Shuttle number 10 mission, found anti-satellite missiles, ASATs, in one of them and flew them to useless orbit. NASA had fun trying to explain 2 in a row failures of the very reliable PAM-D satellite booster. Russia's offer to share their Star Wars defense system with the rest of the world may have been extended to scientific space exploration. For example, the U.S. planned to send 2 manned missions to collect samples and return to a comet, and these missions to cost billions of dollars, some 15 years from now to achieve, and could fail in a dozen ways. And the jumbo Cosmosphere could complete a manufactured mission in a few months if they have not already done so, as these Cosmospheres can accelerate constantly. Okay, so the acceleration is constantly accelerating. So note that now, instead of the epilogue, as the author here understands, the physics behind the development of Cosmospheres were developed by a German physicist who makes Stephen Hawking look like an idiot, who in fact, along with other idiot Einstein, we both wore them late. They also took Tesla's work after his death. Everyone thinks it was by the Americans. It's not. It's also the subject of misinformation against General Keegan, who reported on the Soviet threat since 1977. This information confirmed that the first generation of Cosmospheres were built in Semipalatinsk and Novosibirsk of Russia. And the author says, from what I understand, Lockheed Martin developed similar technology back in 1992, although their platforms are not global. This issue is huge. As important as it is, I'll come back. This is sourced from Terra Papers, and I've translated this for you from a Greek article. I think this is really fascinating. Can you imagine electromagnetic propulsion and acceleration going ever increasing? This is amazing. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.